And I guess Heather's not here, so maybe we'll just try to jot down a few notes.
Oh, she's going to go off the recording. Hi, everybody. I had a terrible migraine this afternoon, so I'm going to be chilling here.
Okay. Okay, well, should we introduce our guests, or they can introduce themselves?
And then we can introduce ourselves again.
Yeah. Thank you. I would appreciate that. I'll go first. John Steinmetz, principal planner with Bergman, and I don't recall the last time we talked if we did backgrounds and histories. I'll just give you a really quick bio, just to give you some perspective. 27 plus years as a planner, mostly in the private sector as a consultant, but I have done stints in the public sector and also on my local town conservation board, and then also on my local village planning board. So I've worn a lot of hats over the years, and I enjoy doing this kind of work and looking forward to getting going with this group.
I'll go next. I'm Katie Darcy. I'm also a planner with Bergman. I've been working under John under various forms for the last couple of years. I'm a Cornell grad, so take that as you will, for better or for worse. But lifelong upstate New York resident, aside from a small stint in Boston. So happy to be working on this project and ready to get started.
Okay, I'm Tom Butler, co-chair with our friend next door here, and I'm the liaison with the planning board.
I think you both know me, Carrie Koplinkalayer, co-chair with Tom.
I'm John Fleming, dairy farmer in North Lansing.
I'm Todd Walter. I'm a hydrologist at Cornell University, and I happen to know that John is in his bed because that's the only place in his house where he can find any peace and quiet. Is that correct, John? And he's finding lots of it right now. Anyway, yeah, I'm a little disheveled because I just got back from the garden, so happy to be here.
Ed Dubrovy, retired Cornell professor, just on the CAC for the last 6 months, so somewhat new to the process.
Hi, I'm Robin Bailey. I'm on the committee and I am a wildlife biologist. So that is what I specialize in, also working at Cornell.
Karen.
Hey, hi. Sorry, I was late.
You want to introduce yourself? Although I'm sure they already know you.
Sure. I'm Karen Edelstein. I've been in Lansing for about 31 years. I'm an environmental cartographer.
Are you considered local yet after 31 years?
Nah, not here. No roads named after me. Edelstein Road. Ain't happening.
Sounds about right.
Okay, well, and maybe some more will join the meeting, but that's what we have here now. So I don't believe there's any in the public that is attending this meeting. Is that right, CJ?
I don't see anybody here.
Okay.
And I'm CJ Randall, Director of Planning for the town of Lansing and staff to the council.
Okay, well, so let's move on to Bergman Associates and our plan of action.
All right, I'm gonna see if I can share a screen there. We use Microsoft Teams, and I used to use Zoom, so I'm a little rusty on where things are sometimes. So just bear with me finding the controls. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Yep, it's good. Let me just see everyone here. See if I can do this. All right, good. Oh, sorry. not a big presentation today, more of a working session just to kind of help us get our ducks in a row with you. So what we figured it'd just be easier to throw a few slides together. I think on Zoom, it just tends to keep people a little more focused. In terms of housekeeping items, I heard through the grapevine from CJ that the contract's been approved, just getting routed through. So thank you. We appreciate it. Again, the opportunity and that's moving its way through the natural order of town government. The other thing, we got your unique natural areas at 12:06 this morning. Thank you. That was impressive. Someone was burning the midnight oil. So thank you for sending that along. We'll coordinate with our Maria and our GIS group to get the rest of the data too. We're going to want some of the, all the data you've got, we'll take it all. Whether it's natural resources, we can go through the New York State stuff and, we've got access to that and we use that on a regular daily basis, but we'll, CG, I'm guessing it might be easier just to coordinate with you in terms of getting any other local town specific GIS data that's out there.
Yeah, we certainly can get that for you.
Okay. So that information exchange is occurring and will continue to.
John, just in terms of the NRI, do you have that already? Because I think that's public access along with our open space index.
I think we do.
Okay.
We've got a growing repository that
okay.
I think
If you don't, it can be found on the Lansing website. It's a little hard to wend your way through that, but we can guide you through.
Yeah, we had, I had our intern pull, I said, pull every plan that's on the town website.
Okay.
So if we haven't pulled that one, we'll make sure we do.
Okay.
One of the next things I'd like to do is have a day when Katie and I can come down and impose upon one or two of you to kind of give us a tour and kind of, it's always nice to have local committee people show us around the community. And, we're great with maps, but it's nice to associate the real view shed with a view shed that someone identified in a document, or a real natural area, laying eyes on it with a geographic feature and a GIS layer or something like that. So, that's something we'd like to, like I said, try to happen in the next few weeks, depending on people's availability. We can be flexible. We understand we get paid for this and you guys don't. So, if we want to do it during the day, great. If it needs to be, later in the afternoon, that's okay too. So we'd like to set that up, and I'll defer to, Tom and Carrie, how best to do that, in terms of the one or two people that get shackled touring, giving us a tour. How best should we do that and schedule that?
Yeah, maybe we can even decide today, if there are two people who would like to be your tour guides. This is probably the easiest way to do it as you wrap up this meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good. So, be thinking about that, and, we can do that before we hop off. It should take a couple hours. If it takes more, that's fine. We won't be in a hurry. And, but generally to do a thorough job, it takes a couple hours, give or take, because we do like to stop and get pictures. And, it's not just a drive around. It's a, drive here and stop, drive there and stop. So just keep that in mind.
I would guess that it might take longer than 2 hours.
It could, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It's my record is 6 hours. So if it takes 6, that's fine. But that's been the longest one that we've ever done. In terms of existing plans and studies, as we have started our review. We've looked at the comp plan. We've looked at the form-based code, the Parks Rec and Trail master plan. We're still the NRIs to be reviewed, the scenic resources inventory. So we're making our way through the previous planning efforts and the information that's out there and available.
John, one thing that got left off of the left-hand column there is we've also taken a look at the ag plan.
Mm-hmm.
One thing we have that's not complete, but would probably be useful is we're doing a the town would like to have a scenic byway overlay district, and we've picked out some areas that we think are particularly nice to protect in any way we can. So
Yeah, we got a slide deck with some of the
oh, okay.
overlay districts. So we've
Okay.
got that, but anything else you could send us would be great too.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, anything like that, I'd rather have you make us aware of it and say we already got that rather than you know, being quiet on it. So
Sure.
yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
I know at an earlier meeting, I had mentioned that I would like to have something with a trails, a proposed trails map for the town, and you implied that that's probably not appropriate for your group, but I do. There are a number of people in the town that have been working on trails for a long time, and so I did tell them that I'd like them to put together some kind of map, and maybe we can include it as an appendix or something like that.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I think what we had talked about before, and for the rest of the group, you know, Tom had brought up that item as a wish list item, which we do trail planning. I'm an advocate for that kind of thing. So I think it's a sound idea. It's just not something that typically is rolled into a open space planning effort. So we need to devote our time and energy to making sure the open space planning index and the open space conservation conversation that's going to happen in this process and in this document is what it needs to be. Whereas a trail planning effort, it's just a different it's a different use of time and resources. So what we can do is, like you said, Tom, is we can weave that in. And even though I don't think I've done it before, I think I mentioned before, I've given it some thought, and we might be able to put in the desirability of a trail in a certain location to be part of the rating criteria. So it's, you can highlight the need for a trail in certain areas, especially if you have a map, and that could be part of what makes one property potentially rated higher in the index than another. Is the fact that meaning we the town, we wanted to accommodate a trail in the future. So I think we can speak to it, but as I said to you before, we can't get into designating, is this a multi-use trail? What are the users? What's the surface type going to be? What are the right-of-way implications or easements that would be necessary? That, all of that stuff is typically in a trail plan, cross sections, things like that. So we can't get into that level of detail, but we can include that in our conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're not really expecting you to put time and effort into that. It would be something from the Lansing end.
Yeah, it's good. Because like I said, it's a great idea.
Yeah, and maybe we can incorporate some trail advocates into our stakeholder interviews as well, if that kind of rises to the top of priority as well.
So the main thing we want to spend some time on tonight, and I just want to make sure, again, I can't remember how Zoom versus Teams, is the gallery of your faces obscuring this on your screen, or you're just seeing the slide?
We can see this. I can see the slide perfectly without it being obscured.
Great. Okay. Just one, because you guys are partially obscuring my view, which is fine. I'll just move you around as needed. So I think and we're flexible on time frame. All of this is to be discussed. That's why we're having this conversation. So I believe in the RFP, it mentioned an 18-month time frame. I think we proposed 10 to 12. Either is fine. I think 18 is probably unnecessarily long. I think we can do this in 10 to 14 months, something like that. And I think what generally happens with planning processes, they flex. Sometimes they get done sooner, not often, but sometimes they do. And then sometimes, whether it's holidays or committees say, look, we've had committees say we want to take August off or something like that. We don't meet in the summers. We can accommodate that kind of thing too. So we try to be flexible. So this is our starting point for what we think makes sense in terms of timing and sequencing. So we have included, up to 8 advisory committee meetings. And as you see, it's not something that, you guys will continue your regular monthly meetings. We can touch base to give you updates, but we want to have substantive conversations with you every month. We'll need a little bit more time than that in between certain deliverables to do our homework, and especially between the first and second meeting. As you'll see, we've got a lot to do over the summer. And then we'll, do more of a formal presentation to you probably in the early fall. One of the things we want to do over the summer is stakeholder interviews as best we can. The nice thing about them, if certain people like the farming community, the farmers are very busy in the summer. So correct me if I'm wrong, John, but I know that's a busy season for farmers. So if we need to wait till fall to finish a stakeholder interview or 2, that's fine. But, summer tends to be a decent time to have stakeholder interviews. We'll do some in person, we'll do some over the phone, whatever is the most convenient for the people we want to talk to. So one of the things that we'll be asking for before we break up is for you to think about, a list of names of people that we should be discussing this project and this effort and this initiative with. We're looking at 2 public meetings, one earlier on in the process to inform the community about what the project is, what we're trying to accomplish, what brought us to this point and where we hope to end up. And then near the end of the process, you'll see, and we'll have a second public meeting to do a dog and pony show and a kind of a show and tell. The format of each of those, we've got ideas that based on what we've done elsewhere and what works well and what may not work as well, but we'll obviously bounce those ideas off of you to make sure that the format and the process that we use to run the meetings lends itself to Lansing based on previous successes or failures you've had in other efforts. And one of the things we'll do tonight too is talk about how to get the word out in the public engagement. That's the next slide. So we don't have to get into too much detail on the public engagement yet. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But we're looking at 2 public meetings, and the second public meeting right now, it either would end up, our preference would be either to back it up to June if we're in that position and we're ready to go, or move it forward to September. We generally like to meet June or September. Having a public meeting in the summer generally tends to be challenging for attendance. We have done it. The first and second week in July after Labor or after 4th of July tends to be okay, but we'd rather time that second meeting, near the end of the school year or the beginning of the school year. But again, we can plan that now, but we can flex it as needed when the time comes, and depending on our readiness and where the project stands. Our next item of a to-do list for us is to develop that communications and outreach strategy. Again, we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight, but that's our next item on our to-do list. In addition to, and I'm down here in the orange box, in addition to making sure we get all the plans, get all the GIS data, get all the stuff we need, get our toolbox filled up to be able to make sure we can do our existing inventory and analysis adequately for this project. So information gathering and data collection is also what we're going to be working on over the next month. Then moving down here, once we have all that in place, once we talk to the stakeholders, once we huddle back up with yourselves, we'll start to really dive into the conservation land tool and assessment, and with Maria and our GIS folks. And that we're going to be working on that before August, but that's when we'll really jump in earnest once we know we've got everything we need. And when we know that the inventory analysis is strong, then we're going to really start to say, all right, what's a ranking criteria? Where is the critical environmental areas? Where are the view sheds? How do they relate to each other? What's more valuable in terms of the community values for Lansing? So that kind of conversation will be happening in the fall. And as we're doing that, we'll be creating multiple versions of open space conservation maps, and it's invaluable. The mapping's invaluable. So we'll end up working with you, try to not be, haphazard about it, and try not to make your life too burdensome with homework, but you'll be looking at a lot of different versions of ranking criteria and resulting maps, in the fall and into the winter. We also propose doing a story map development. That's If you don't know what that is, it's a geographic information systems tool. It's a GIS tool that looks very much like a website. It functions similar to some websites, but it's as the name implies, we're very, very good at telling a story. And we can integrate maps, we can integrate photos, we can integrate data in a very nice, compelling format. So we're gonna, as part of this, we'll be developing a story map to inform the public about what we're doing, but also once this project is over, the story map can live on. So a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, if somebody wants to revisit the process, the project online, the story map will enable them to do that. Oh, Karen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to, thanks for taking the question. I just want to jump back to the conservation open areas mapping where you talked about getting help from the committee with the ranking. Is that going to be broadened to other parts of the stakeholder base, or are we a proxy for the community on that?
What will happen is at the first public meeting, we're going to kind of poke and prod in terms of, the values of the community and what the community values in terms of open space and prioritization. We're not necessarily going to ask them to prioritize. We'll ask them to identify, and we'll ask them what types of open space are important to them. And maybe get into some light ranking, but not necessarily taking what they say as gospel, but taking that as input for yourselves. And if we want, then once we, again, the collective we, the group, all of us, start to come up with a preliminary ranking criteria, listing and matrix and weighting, if we think, let's talk to the planning board or let's talk to some other stakeholders about it, absolutely we can. Absolutely we can definitely do that. So I'm not concerned about reaching out and having more input in that process. I think that's fine. Typically, we would not have the public okay it. I think it is something that can be done through this group and through kind of by proxy, but I do think we'll use the public as, kind of help them guide us in the early stages of that development. Does that make sense?
Oops, I was on mute, sorry. Yes, yeah, thanks.
Good question. So once we have the story map, the conservation mapping area is done, the tool has been successful, we're nailing it as a group, we're doing great. Then we can start talking about implementation strategy. How are we going to make sure that this plan doesn't just sit and gather dust? How are we actually going to make sure, it gets implemented? What are the resources? Funding, volunteer, otherwise, capital, human, whatever the resources might need to be, we'll identify those and talk about those in the implementation strategy. And we're guesstimating that to be sometime in the spring of next year. And again, if we need to accelerate that, or if because of something happens, or the group says, we need to push that back a little bit, then again, that's fine. We're flexible, but that seems like a realistic time frame. Once we have that, we'll collect all the existing pieces that were produced throughout the process into the draft open space index and conservation plan document. At that point, we'll start to test it. At that point, that might be a good time. Some of our groups say, let's go out to public at the draft stage. Sometimes groups say, let's get this more refined. Let's have more of a final document, more of a show and tell. At the end of the process. We've done it both ways, and we can talk about that when the time comes. And then we show down here, if you notice this little circle with a star in it, we talk about presenting to the boards. Typically we do a joint board workshop. So, planning board, zoning board, CAC, elected officials, get them all in a room, buy them pizza and some soda, and kind of walk through the recommendations of the plan and the process. And then you see this bluish, teal, greenish line that goes all the way through. The online engagement that we hope to do during this is to use the town's website. We would recommend the town create a page for this effort, and then we can populate that over time. We also have the proposal. We have planned on doing a survey, an online survey of the community early on in the process. We should, Katie, just mental note, we should show that earlier in the process. We can just kind of highlight the survey as a piece of that line. And again, that will complement the input we get at the first public meeting. So, you know, in the beginning, we'll do survey, we'll do the first public meeting to try to really interface, and the stakeholder interviews to try to really interface with the community and get their thoughts on, you know, what types of open space are important, where is it that that we should be looking, you know, where are the geographic areas of the town that are special, and then we can fold that into our decision-making tools that we're going to create in the fall.
John, I had a question. This placement of the second public meeting, you said some communities choose to do it after the draft open space index is ready, and others want more of a final product. When you have done it with more of a final product, how have you figured out how to incorporate substantial changes that people have commented on in the final draft stage when you're almost done with the project? That's one of my worries.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, doing that between the draft and final, from what I'm hearing, Carrie, based on your experience, that might be the better thing to do for this project in Lansing, is to do an open house or something like that. Ideally, if it's in person, you know, hopefully COVID willing, do some kind of open house where we can have conversations. And again, when I say we, at a meeting like that, it would be all of us. You know, Katie and I would be there, but you guys would be the same facilitators as we would. We would probably break up into different tables, and how we do it, whether we do it geographic or I don't know, but we would have some creative way to do it, and, you know, use you as facilitators as well to get that feedback, and then roll it into the final revised document. When we haven't done it, we've done it further on in the process. That's not my preference, but the times we have done that, and it's been more than you might think, they generally tend to be community planning efforts that are universally supported. You know, it's road diets. A lot of times in the transportation world, believe it or not, I mean, that's where, you know, if a neighborhood signs a petition and they want traffic calming and road diets and speed bumps and all that stuff, by the time we're done at the show and tell, they're so appreciative of the effort. There's really not a lot of revisions to be had. Would we do them? Of course we would, but we kind of know going in that it's going to be well received. You know, so do we want comment? Yes. Are the comments generally significant? That's going to change the scope of the project? No. You know, so for something like this where it might be contentious, I would back it up and do one in between the draft and the final. If you think it's going to be contentious, we don't have to decide that now. We can kind of see how it goes. But what I'm hearing, Carrie, for the next revised version of this, we'll slide that over to kind of be in between these two efforts for now, just for planning purposes.
I mean, I think that would be great. I don't know what other people are thinking at this stage, what their thoughts are, but that, I think moving the two over a little would make me feel more comfortable.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But we'll see how it all works out.
Mm-hmm.
So again, just to recap, not to belabor it, but, you know, as Katie, as planners, we think in seasons. So, you know, the summer data collection, making sure we got our I's dotted and our T's crossed and all the information that we need. Start scheduling the first public meeting, get the survey online, promote the survey, talk to the stakeholders. In the fall, take all that input, use the input, work as a team, collective team, all of us, to develop the rating criteria and start applying that criteria to the map, you know, the various mapping products we're going to create and develop for you, and have conversations around them, either virtually or in person. Create a story map. Then in the spring, look at the implementation strategy, and then late spring, early summer, potentially doing a draft open space plan and, you know, having that second public meeting. And then if that works out, great, we'll work over the next summer and finalize it. That's a nice time. I feel comfortable with that time frame. If we need more time and this second public meeting comes in September, I'm comfortable with that too. You know, we're not trying to rush this. We want to make sure it's right. How's that sound to everybody before we move on? Good. Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Thank you.
So communications and outreach strategy. It's been a long day. I'm having a hard time talking tonight. So stakeholders, we don't need, it's not speak now, forever hold your peace, but we do need a list of stakeholders. Normally we would have 6 to 8 conversations. Those conversations can be one-on-one, they can be groups. So it doesn't necessarily limit us to 6 or 8 people. We're not going to have 25 conversations. That tends to be a little overkill. When the time comes later on in the process, if there are key landowners whose property, comes up with as being a high priority preservation area, can we have conversations with that person at that time? Of course we can. But for now, we just want to start to talk to the farming community, talk to some of the major landowners, anyone that you think would benefit us and increase our understanding and our perspective of the town. Those are the kind of people we want to speak with. Environmental folks, kind of a cross section. A lot of the hats I think all of you wear in this committee are the types of people we want to talk with. So if you have names now, we'll take them. If you want to, Carrie, I'll defer to you and Tom. If you guys want to do it, get back to us on that. If you want to send them, talk amongst yourself via email. Sometimes we find an email thread is really helpful to say, here's my 4 or 5 names. What do you all think? And then that email thread can grow. And then at the end, we're like, okay, we've heard from the entire committee. Here's a list of names. Now we'll try to organize it in some meaningful, efficient way to talk to everybody.
Why don't we just decide right now as a CAC whether you think that would be a little bit more meaningful and measured approach than us just shouting out names right now? Are people feeling like maybe we ought to have an email train or a Google Doc?
Yeah, I think some sort of I think shouting out names right now is probably not very useful, Carrie, but I think we all have a bunch in our heads, and it might be good for us to ping pong them back and forth across each other to just see who we think, make sure we have a balanced suite of stakeholders.
Mm-hmm.
Google Docs are great. Not everyone.
Google Docs is fine.
Is everyone comfortable with Google Docs? If you're not, we can still use it, and you could just email, Tom, Carrie, myself, Katie. I mean, we could, upload it for you if you're not using Google Docs. I don't want anyone who's tentative about using Google Docs not to say it and then, not participate. We can upload your information. That's not a problem.
I'm fine with Google Docs, but I have a question about when you say names of people, you mean names of groups and interest groups or clubs, not individual people, or both?
Both. Generally, it's individual people, but it can be clubs or groups. We do that commonly as well. It's usually more often individual than if it's 5 or 6 people in the same walk of life, we might merge them into a single group rather than having 5 conversations. But if there's already standing groups that you think we should speak to, that's easy too.
Okay, thanks. That answered my question.
Public meetings, we've already talked about a little bit. We don't have to worry about the first public meeting yet. I think it's far enough out where we've got time. We'll eventually have the conversation. Do we want it in person, virtual? There's pros and cons to both. We don't have to decide right now. I'm happy to talk about it right now if you want, but that's something that we'll talk about format. We'll talk about how to get the word out. And we want to find out, and this is something I do want to talk about right now. we want to find out, what has worked well and what, I don't know, mistakes sound like a strong too, might be too strong of a word, but, on your previous planning efforts, what lessons have you learned when it comes to public outreach in Lansing that we should avoid or replicate the good stuff?
Maybe Karen, you want to talk a little bit about the what was it, the thing that the town meeting that you went to where people seemed surprised by the recommendations? Was that
We already had a pretty lengthy conversation with John earlier in the week, but it's just basically getting outreach to people so that they understand how they may be impacted by a plan and matching the goals of whatever the public outreach or survey is with the people who are likely to be affected by it. So in the case of the Ludlowville Park, nobody really, most people in Ludlowville, from what we can tell, didn't realize that the Parks and Rec plan even applied to Ludlowville Park. I did read through the summary that CJ had sent to me this week, and apparently there were a lot of people who did weigh in on the plan. There was one mention of bathrooms in that, but it got sort of generalized to incorporate into the plan, whereas all of the concerns that people had about the park being overrun by people from outside the community, that really wasn't addressed so much. So I think it just, I just think that we need to find fair representation between the community and the goals.
Karen, in that same process, and yeah, thank you for sharing that again, or previous processes. I mean, what has worked well? I mean, if you guys had good attendance, virtual meetings, you had good attendance in person, what, is it advertisement in the local paper have gotten good turnout? I mean, we've tried everything, and everything doesn't work everywhere. So what's worked well in Lansing to get the word out?
Well, John, this committee hasn't really been operating for long enough to have done a whole lot of that sort of thing. So personally, I can't speak to that other than what this recent experience was on the rec plan. So
No, I appreciate that.
Can't really give you a very nuanced answer there.
When we were putting together the comprehensive plan, one of the fundamental things we started with was a community survey, and I thought that went really well. We really garnered a lot of information from the survey, but that survey was done by Cornell Survey Research Institute. They were a professional group, and it cost like, I don't know, $10K or something to do it, but it turned out to be very valuable. So I think a community survey, if it's done right and ask the right questions, could be very useful.
That's important. So let me ask you this: did they do it online, paper, both? How is it? How did they actually distribute the survey?
It was online, and I think it was also a paper survey, but this was 2012, and so I don't remember the details too well. But yeah, I think a lot of it was online, and it was phone calls too.
Okay,
they did phone calls. That was a big part of it.
One of the things, and actually we could have pulled up an example. One of the things Katie and I were talking about, we don't have to do this, but one of the things that's nice about technology, we've had success with interactive mapping online. So we can ask questions that have a map component to them and open-ended. We can ask things like very open. It could be more specific or less specific, but essentially, open space areas you'd like to preserve. And, if I'm in front of my computer, I can click on, the 3 or 4 areas I'm concerned with and write a note about them and share my thoughts about them. So we can have a geographic component that's open-ended as part of the survey, if you think that would be valuable. We've had really good luck with it. And we've had, sometimes we've had communities that don't really take full advantage of it. But when it works, it works really well. I think, Katie, that one for Pittsford, we had what, 400 that we did in Pittsford, 400 plus comments about various areas of the town. So it can be a pretty great tool if you think. And again, we don't have to decide that right now, but that's something Katie and I were talking about, that if it worked well, we would love to have that kind of feedback as part of the survey.
I actually love that idea, and it reminds me of a survey that I did that was about our Route 13 traffic situation in Ithaca. I'm not sure if it was administered by the city of Ithaca or the New York DOT. I don't know who administered it, but the survey was about making, at where would more stoplights and stop signs be helpful? And they showed like these maps and diagrams that were so helpful, and actually was enabled me to answer the question, because I'm a very visual person, and just telling me like the intersection of such and such road is not helpful to me. As you can see, I just referred to Lowville as Brookendale. So I don't always get it right trying to think of the names of places, but seeing like an actual map of like, oh yeah, this is the intersection where I turn to go to work, and it's terrible and it's very dangerous, and I would like a stoplight there, was really empowering for me to be able to take that survey. Despite my directional challenges. So I love that idea of, showing people, this is a wetland, this is a Ladoga wetland. What do you think about it? Kind of letting people interact with it and actually see, because, not everyone has been here for 31 years. Some of us have only been here for maybe 10 years and don't yet know all these special places.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Robin. I'm very visual, and the challenge on our side, just so we, let you guys know, the more sophisticated the survey online becomes, the harder it is to translate that to a paper version. It's not impossible, but if Robin, describing what you just said, imagine how would you translate that to a paper survey? It would be.
Yeah, they were just images. Like it was just like a JPEG, not a.
Oh, it wasn't interactive. I got it.
No, but it was like visual, and it clearly marked like northbound, southbound. It was not interactive in that sense, but it was just a well-marked map that showed me where things were.
Got it. So yeah, we had fun with surveys. That's something we'll have to kind of strike a balance of. If you say, we do want to do, the town would like to do some kind of paper copies, we would just want to know that. You don't have to answer it now, because we'll be talking about that next time. But preparing the survey is one of the things we're going to get going on in terms of the questions and the approach, and then we'll come back and run it past you in terms of our thinking. But we will need to know early on in the process if you think the town will want to do some kind of mailer or some kind of paper version, or if it's going to be an online only, because it'll impact how fancy we get online, for lack of a better word.
Do you prefer an online survey?
We do. It's more efficient for us. We can put more effort into making the survey one, visually interesting, user friendly. We can have, I don't know if we would do it for this one, but it's not uncommon for us to, based on their answers, the next question changes. So we can get really sophisticated, and the data's broken down for us immediately. So we can spend a lot of our time creating a better, more rigorous survey and less time tabulating data. So we think the end result is great. We really do.
I would really like to hear from John Fleming on this, because John, I remember you telling me that one of the reasons why the Ag Committee hadn't met during the pandemic was because not everybody had the technology. And I realize there's some other issues that could have been happening, but just in your experience, you kind of on the more techno side of farmers that in Lansing?
Not as much as I should be by any stretch, but definitely more than some. And The question I was just going to ask is, it's very handy and efficient to do the online work, but of the people that you're not going to get through online work, how important is that input, and how much would that potentially shift what you find out, I guess, would be pretty important. And obviously with the ag community, they're going to be directly affected by some of these areas that we're going to be talking about, and they're probably going to specific property, one that's going to be affected and how, like right off the bat. That's going to be their main concern. So it would, obviously that would be a group, if we could just get together and have you guys there as, one of these stakeholder meetings, we could probably take care of a lot of that.
Yeah, you're right, John, because it's kind of the mapping, not saying we're committed to it yet, but doing the mapping online as a survey. If we had a group of property owners, farmers around the table, we'd roll out the maps and essentially do the same thing in person.
Yep, right, yeah. And other major landowners that, might be landlords of a bunch of farmers or would be included in that group potentially.
Yeah, and we can, some communities have gotten creative too. We did a survey in Shiloh. It was an online survey, and it had a lot of the bells and whistles I just talked to you about, Tom, in terms of, it was a transportation survey. So if you're a walker and not a biker and not a cyclist, your set of questions were totally different if you were a cyclist versus if you were both. So it was pretty neat. But the senior citizen set, that we were concerned and the town was concerned about getting them involved. So at Chile has an active senior program. So when they had their, I think it was their breakfast, they had people there that were sitting with a senior citizen at the computer and walking them through the survey. So we ended up getting a lot of senior input because they literally partnered them with someone to help them take the survey at the senior center. And we've had that done with in college interns as well. We've had other ways of getting people to take an online survey that might normally not have access to it or choose to do it. And like I said, we're very good at creating paper versions too. I mean, it just ends to be not as robust. So we're happy doing the online and the paper. We do that a fair amount these days. So that's, just something to think about.
Well, I would say that I lean toward both formats. And one reason is I do think we have a population in Lansing that may not have easy access to internet and the computing capacity to take an online survey. And then I think we also have people who are overwhelmed by email. I kind of feel like one of those people. And when a survey comes, it's a paper survey and it comes in the mail and we don't get that much paper mail. I actually tend to respond to that faster and more frequently than an online survey. So it can gather some attention for me. And precisely because somebody took the extra effort to mail that thing. And I just sort of prick up my attention at that. So I know collating all that stuff, it is a lot more cumbersome.
It is, and the mailing too. So we would, depending on how the town wanted to handle it, we'd have to have the conversation of, it's dependent. Are we handling the mailing costs? That's not something we would normally do. It's not unheard of, but it's not normally that would be something the town would put in a water bill or something like that, or a newsletter or something like that to try to save the mailing costs. We highly recommend that.
Looks like CJ's weighing in on that. Great.
Yeah, there you go, CJ. Thank you. So, all right. So for now, just because again, we want to come up with a brief written outreach strategy. We'll assume both. We're going to say the survey right now is going to be online and paper. Distribution to be determined, but with assistance from the town, whether it's a standalone mailer or whether it's grouped into some other document going out in the mail is to be determined. But that's the approach we'll assume. Sound good?
a paper survey
The
to,
survey, is that,
go ahead, John.
in terms of the questions that are going to be on the survey, is that members of the CAC and you guys, John, coming up with, because obviously you've done a bunch of them, so you would probably know some things that we should be asking.
Yeah, we'll take us, I mean, we always welcome your input in advance of putting pen to paper. But typically, and we are very comfortable with this, we would take the first stab at it and then run it past you, and then you guys can beat us up and say, you guys stink at surveys, you missed the mark. You know, we can have that conversation when the time comes. We always struggle with, and when I say we, committees too, is length and detail. You know, the record, this was not a survey I did. I inherited the project. It was the first comprehensive plan I ever did. And before I got hired, they did a survey on their own, and it was 173 questions. You know, so that's the record. That's the longest survey I've ever seen. And it was all paper, you know, before online anything.
Objectively too long.
It's slightly too long, you know. So that's where I think that's what this group will have with some conversation. It'll be good conversation. Is, you know, we could ask 4 more questions about this or 3 more questions about that. And you absolutely, there's no limit to how many questions you can ask. It's just a limit to how many they will answer. So we'll find our way together.
I think one of our challenges is going to be how will we convince the Lansing resident that this is relevant to their life? And we're going to have to do that early in the survey and in the promotion of it. I mean, someone's going to have to connect that this actually is going to affect their future. But I think there's a bit of a leap there in their everyday activity and then the benefit of this. And it's, you know, it's that people's attention, I think, has really been raised by things like Bell Station and other things that have happened recently. But we might just need to remind them of how important this is. And that's going to take a little bit of creative work, I think.
Well, and it's a good segue, Carrie, into the music in the park idea. It doesn't have to be music in the park. That was just something we were aware of coming in. And one of the things that we do a lot of when we find them incredibly valuable are, we call them pop-up events. It's really not an event, but it's a tent. We have done events, but generally it tends to be a tent and an existing event. So we'll have boards, tables, sometimes handouts, sometimes not. And we just start to, we either grab people, not physically grab them, but grab their attention, or hopefully they see us and are interested enough to come by and say, oh, what's this about? So I've never been to music in the park. If you said, you know what, that's not going to get you the layout, the noise, whatever the case may be. I like loud music, so that doesn't bother me. But you know, if you're saying, you know what, that's not really a good place to have a conversation, then we won't do it. But it just seemed like one option. Or if there's something else going on in the town, you know, over the summer, maybe we should be focused on that. But is there an event that we can kind of tap into the existing flow of people and energy?
So, John, is that Lansing Carnival going to fit in with your scheduling plans in the 3rd week in September?
Yeah, I was saying that to Katie. I couldn't remember when that was. So that's 3rd week in September.
Yeah, sometime around then.
And I know our local Fireman's Carnival, the village I live in has the biggest Fireman's Carnival in our area. So, and it goes day and night. Is your carnival a day and night thing? Is it a day carnival? What's the general?
Kind of, you know, I don't know. I can't remember. I've never gone to it. I've driven by it. It seems like it's afternoon and it's definitely evening. But, you know, I think the reason why that one really jumps out at me is, unlike there's a real pinch point where people walk in from the parking area, because there's nowhere else that they can park and they have to cross the street in front of the firehouse. Whereas with the music in the park, it's loud, it's diffuse. There are people coming from all different directions, and they're there to see something that's going to be starting at a precise moment. Whereas, you know, with the Lansing Carnival, if you're like 2 minutes behind in getting to the Ferris wheel, no big deal. So that's.
Are there others? Are there other community related booths? I know when you walk into our carnival, you've got the, the ambulances, the fundraising
I have
booth.
no idea.
There's
anyone-
3 or 4 different community groups that have that pinch point effect, Karen, that they take advantage of it.
I
Has
think that,
anyone gone? I've never
yeah,
gone.
I think the carnival is small enough that people will find you. I don't think you have to be right at the entrance for people to find you.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
I
that's
think
not
that work.
that's not so much my point, Tom, is just that it compared to the scene down at the music in the park. It just, I've been to those several times, and it's always seemed kind of like more chaotic than people proceeding in kind of a calm way from parking area to the music. It's just my impression. Maybe
Mhm.
maybe other people have had different experiences.
I think both places would work. Both the music in the
I-
park and the carnival.
I think it's worth trying because, a lot of people have to come in through that one main road to Music in the Park. And those who are pedestrians and bikers and stuff could grab a lot of those people coming in on the road to the park. And also with the carnival, I know there've been a lot of groups like, Republicans and Democrats and political groups have their tables there. And so I think there's great potential for both.
It's not, from what I'm hearing, I would lean towards the carnival, but it doesn't mean we still can't do the music in the park. And one of the things I would say to this group, to you guys, we're really good at, we call meetings in a box. We can also provide you with materials to attend things. If you say, you know what, I think we should attend this, we're going to do it. We can talk to the people as CAC members. We always try to make sure that our committees have ownership of the process. So if you guys say, you know what, we can handle a pop-up event at this event or that event, we'll make sure we'll give you the easels, we'll have everything you need, and then you guys can also do it as well. So that way we're not limited to what Katie and I can attend or what we can attend. But I think the carnival, I'm leaning towards the carnival one. A little bit. And then Robin, you talk about 4th of July fireworks. Is that happening this year? Does anyone know?
No idea.
I don't know either.
I don't think it did happen the last 2 years because of COVID, but I'm not sure about this year. But it's in the same place as Music in the Park, but there may also be music, or there has been in the past, but I don't know if it's happening, and it'd be pretty soon, I guess, anyway, for that matter. It'll be next month. So that was just another thing that I thought brought a lot of Lansing residents together.
And does anyone have a schedule for the chicken barbecues? I think that's probably, it's like Lions Club, right?
Well,
I could ask Dave Hatfield does the majority of them. I could ask him to give me a schedule. I'm sure he has one.
that's about every weekend.
Yeah.
Is it? Wow.
I think Karen, you mentioned the timing. If the carnival is the 3rd week in September, that actually could work out almost perfectly. Because if we had the first public meeting, I would say a week or 2 after that, give or take, you could have the conversations, but also let people know about the meeting. So it would be kind of a nice synergy between getting the word out in an informal way at the pop-up event, and then garnering attention and hopefully attendance at the first public meeting. That would be kind of cool.
Are we under any kind of restriction about using the school for this kind of thing, of getting information out to the parents of the students? Seems to be a captive audience that you could hand a flyer or something to, at least advertising the public meeting that could get taken home.
We have done that before. It varies from school district to school district. Some school districts have let us use their, they didn't give us a list, but they sent email blasts out on our behalf. They sent flyers home in school from school. So that's not uncommon. I can't speak for your school district. We haven't had that discussion. I don't know, but if anyone has a liaison at the school district or knows someone in a leadership position over there, let us know. I had one thing, so funny story. I remember whenever I think of it at a public meeting, I always ask the audience how they heard about the meeting so we know what worked and what doesn't. We had a really successful meeting. This is a long time ago. It was a quarter study in Amherst and Clarence. So, two relatively larger places. And we had about 120 people. And I asked, went around the room, how did everyone hear about the meeting? And we sent 800 flyers home with middle school kids. 2 people came up to the meeting because of the flyers. Which tells me, middle school kids are completely unreliable at bringing stuff home and giving them to parents. And I had parents come up to me after and say, I've got a middle school kid. I never saw it. I'm like, well, we tried. And actually we're that particular meeting and dozens, I won't say hundreds, I'm not that old, but dozens of meetings since then. One of the biggest ways two of the biggest ways people hear about public meetings and come out is announce it in church. And put it on a board, the fire station or a town hall, put it on the board out front. Those 2 things tend to be pretty reliable ways to get people out to a public meeting. Not always, but they tend to be the big winners over my career. So, but yeah, we'll talk about that stuff, the public meeting in the fall. Oh, there we go. CJ said, yes, we can publish the survey, key meetings in the Lansing Central School District listserv. Love listservs. Goes to all the parents as far as I know, but haven't had a request, but I've had to request in advance. And we can also tap into local social media, if there's Facebook pages or, things like fire districts. I know generally speaking, I won't speak for Lansing, but in a lot of places we work, the fire district tends to have the biggest Facebook group, bigger than libraries, sometimes bigger than the schools. And, organizations like that will let us promote the meeting on their Facebook page or social media, Instagram, or whatever the case may be.
And, probably the library would be willing, that's actually another nice place to have a pop-up thing at the library, maybe on Saturday morning or something, and the library will promote that through their newsletter, I'm sure.
And then the ball fields are very, very active, spring, summer, early fall. So, I'm thinking you can get a whole bunch of parents and family members at some of those sporting events. And they're all,
go ahead, sorry, Carrie.
They're all in a pretty close area, town
with
ball.
With a lot of time to kill.
With a lot of time to kill. And I don't know how we're going to draw these people in, but I don't know. Candy.
Well, and that's one thing I'll say it again. I mean, we can't attend all of these good ideas. So, I would ask would you guys feel comfortable? You don't have to answer now, but think about it. Would you guys feel comfortable if we had, gave you the materials and that we were very user friendly, simple board, simple questions? Would any of you feel comfortable throughout the summer, attending and hosting a pop-up event or 2? Because I'm trying to think, we're in June. So what's your next meeting, Tom?
July 7th.
July 7th. Remember that. So well, go ahead, Tom.
The people that I think and I think probably most people on this committee would agree that the people that we really have to engage are the large landowners. And a lot of those are farmers. But they own a big chunk of the town and they have a lot of open space. And so we really need their input more than the average Joe in Lansing, I would say.
I think that's a valid statement. And we'll get it. We'll make sure that we do everything we can to reach out and get and connect with major landowners. Again, mostly farming community, I'm sure. And if there's other major landowners that aren't farmers, we'll reach out to them too. Or we'll just have John meet with them all. John, let me know how it goes.
I'm pretty sure I know how it will go.
I think that's all. I think that's all we've got for tonight. The last thing I was going to ask, and we're a little over on time, so I'll ask it next time. But I know you have other items, and I want to keep our thing to an hour. We're just at an hour. So the next thing, the next meeting when we get together, I'll ask you a pretty basic question. What do each of you hope to get out of this? I mean, if you could say, well, this effort would be a success if these one or two things result from it. So think about that question in advance. It's an easy question, but we would like you to have that conversation with us next time.
So we kind of have that to think about for next time, but before you go, do we want to see if we can get you the 2 tour guides from our group?
Yes. Who's the lucky couple? I know some will be date dependent, but we'll be as flexible as we need.
Let's talk dates first, since we're talking couples. You're thinking sometime in the next 2 weeks, John?
2 to 3 weeks. I'm taking some time off at the end of the week of the 13th. But Katie and I were talking. I mean, we could do the 14th. We could do the week after the whatever that is. Let me pull up a calendar. So I'm not talking so much in generalities. So the 14th does work for us, or the week of the 20th.
That's the same day as the Bell Station tour.
The 14th.
Yeah,
The 14th.
that's the 14th.
Is that a
is
good
the
thing?
Bell
or
Station tour.
That'd be smart to try and link them up,
Or stay away from that.
That might actually be, well, the Bell Station is already going to be preserved. You want to see land that's not preserved?
I want to see a little I can't say I want to see everything because it's just not always possible. So a lot of lands we're going to be talking about are interior parcels sometimes too. Those are a little harder to see, but no, we want to see a little bit of both. I mean, if you've got land that is preserved and we're going past it, of course we want to put that mental note with the map that's going to be in front of us when we drive around or ride around. So yeah, a little both would be the simplest answer.
And I would think, John, right, seeing both would allow you to really get a construct of contiguous potential corridors to look at as kind of keystone areas to see linkages between what are gaps and what might need to be linked in this analysis.
I'm trying to look at the other day that Katie and you and I haven't talked about this, so if it's bad for you, don't be shy. The 23rd, because if you guys are already doing something on the 14th, I wouldn't want to make you guys do. If it works out good, great. If it's better, good. But I also wouldn't want you to pull double duty on that day if it's not good for everyone. So the 14th can work for us, and the 23rd, how's that look for you, Katie?
That looks fine.
I don't think we want to. The Bell Station land tour is probably going to take too long at one place, so I wouldn't. I'm not sure it's a good idea to have those overlap.
I understand that.
Well, one idea is if people can do it on that date, you end up at Bell Station.
Yeah.
And that's the last stop. And then John and Katie can peel off.
Yeah,
After,
that's a good idea.
They get to meet. If you haven't, you probably know Andy Zepp and Kelly. I think Kelly McCosh is going to be there, but Andy's definitely going to be there. He would be a fabulous person to, meet if you haven't met him.
It sounds like someone that might be a stakeholder too.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It could be a nice hi bye kind of thing.
So I guess that either of those dates work for us, and I guess then that goes back to the 2 tour guides. If one of those dates is better, we're fine either way.
If I'm involved, the 14th would definitely be better. Because I was hoping to make the Bell Station thing. So if
You're already doing it.
yeah, once I get off the farm, I might be able to stay off for a few hours.
I can,
If that doesn't work, I'm completely booked up on the 14th and I'm not going to Bell Station, but I do have the afternoon open, I think, on the 23rd. So consider that a backup if that works too.
Tom, you were going to say something?
I can do the 14th, but I'll be gone on the 23rd.
And I'm the same. But I'm happy not also being a tour guide if other people would like to, like if John, you and Tom want to do it on the 14th.
Well, we can have more than 2 people also.
You can also have people barking from the sidelines. Don't forget to take him to this. Don't forget to take him to that.
Why didn't you take them here? You know you're gonna get back. You're gonna get second guessed. You're like, why you didn't show them this? It's inevitable.
I do have an idea that piece on Trip Hammer and Burdick Hill Road is like, oh my gosh, I can't ever remember if it falls in the town or the village, but it's like that thing should be preserved. So anyway, just putting my oar in the water there. Well,
I got one thing to say. The planning board does not like the word preserved.
sorry, conserve, protected.
Conserve is fine, preserve is not. Todd Walter can tell you all about that with our meeting with the planning board. And I've heard it before too. I mean, that was not the first time. They don't like the word preserve. Just thought I'd mention that.
Noted.
I run into that a couple times actually. That's funny.
So, John Fleming and Tom, you're good to go?
Yes, and anybody else on the committee that wants to go and can make it, I think they should come.
Or give anyone that wants to give any input as to where we should be going. You know, we can start out. We can get a list so that we're less likely to have the situation where somebody's saying, "Why didn't you go there?"
Yeah.
What are we thinking, Tom? In terms, we don't. Again, you can let us know. And John, specifically, you mentioned you're going to be doing some work that day. What time is realistic to get started?
Well, so if we're going to end up at Bell Station, that's at 3 p.m. Is that right?
Yeah.
So might want to start by noon.
We can do that.
Does that sound okay, John?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. We're at the street, John.
I don't know.
I'm John.
So meet at town hall.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, good. And so the only other order of business is who's going to start the Google Doc for the stakeholder list.
John, I can set that up and pass it around if that's easy.
All right, thanks, Katie.
Shouldn't be too much of a lift.
Great, thank you.
All right, Katie and I have all night, but I know you guys have other things to do. But we're good. Thank you for all the conversation and the input that we needed tonight. This has been great.
This is great, thank you. Really appreciate you both being on board. Katie, welcome again. It's really
Thank you.
nice to have you, and so appreciate the good thinking you've already done.
This is going to be a challenging project, but a fun project. All right, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Yes, thanks a lot. That was great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do we want to talk a little bit more about the open space index, or are we gonna lay that to rest for now?
I'm
Okay.
thinking with our other items, if we have any time at the end, we could circle around, but I just have
Okay.
a sense that we might use up the rest of the time on the other things.
Okay, so the next item,
You know, the only, sorry, now that I said that, do we want to set a little bit of a deadline for when people would provide feedback on that Google Doc that Katie is gonna come up with? Like
So
maybe
that's-
a week or
that-
two so they can get going on stakeholders?
so what are you proposing?
I'm just saying, you know, if Katie doesn't put a deadline on the Google Doc for the stakeholders, you know, we're gonna want names and organizations and some comments. I think it should be pretty straightforward, but we might want to just talk about the process and have a deadline for when we give them some feedback so that they already have that and they can get their questions organized by our next meeting.
Well, we can, I mean, even just through email, we can, people can add stakeholders that they think are appropriate.
Mhm. And maybe just aim for, I don't know, I'm just thinking for, as far as the timing, maybe aim for when we get together at Bell Station or something as a date to aim for.
Okay. So that's.
I was a little confused. Oh, sorry, Tom, I thought you were Jen.
No, go ahead, go ahead.
I was a little confused by the ask for like specific people's names. Unless we're also giving them their contact information, how are they gonna reach out to those people? I was thinking that they were asking for things like, oh, the Cayuga Bird Club and the Watershed Group and the Friends of the Trails and the, Lions Club and that kind of thing. But when he said it was individual people, I was a little at first I thought, yeah, I can think of individuals, but am I comfortable giving them their contact information? Is that what we're being asked to do? Maybe I should just wait till I see the email.
Or maybe individual people who would represent groups is what he's asking.
That's my thinking. And in that capacity, I think it's fair enough to give contact information. Just like if somebody wanted to get in touch with the CAC, obviously they can contact, CJ or Tom or myself. And I think we sort of take on that mantle when we agree to help lead the group. So I think that's fair enough. Like with Cayuga Bird Club, you probably know who's head of it. And I think it's fair to provide contact information for that person.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure do they need to reside in Lansing or just because I don't know if the president does, but I was thinking, there's specific birders that I know that live in Lansing that might want to take it. I know people that are really into fitness and use the trails for fitness. There's different stakeholders, but I don't know if I should just be giving out their emails if they're not affiliated with a specific organization. I mean, I could just ask them if that's cool with them, but it feels a little weird to be because they're getting in. This is for an invite to the meeting, right? Not the survey.
No, I think this is an interview.
Like a face-to-face interview.
I think so.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fine if they don't reside in Lansing. They're stakeholders, which means they have an interest in what happens in Lansing. And I wouldn't be discriminatory in that way.
That wouldn't dissuade you. They live in Ithaca. Is that what you said?
It doesn't matter where they live. They have an interest and expertise in Lansing, much in the same way if, we're inviting Andy Zeppin, he doesn't live in Lansing. So, you know what I mean? Is that they have an interest, they have skills, they're informants, they're not taxpayers, but they're providing essential information to, to deepen the understanding of what John needs to do the work. So I think it's totally fine if they reside outside the town.
Yeah, I just took some notes on what he had said. We need a stakeholder list, people we should speak with, a cross section of all the hats that CAC members wear in this community. If we have names of individuals, clubs, groups, we'll do it. We can do a Google Doc and work off of each other's contacts. Standing groups are okay. So, like Mike Siegler came to mind because I actually think, Mike Siegler knows a lot about this community, has sort of a county perspective, landowner. I think it would be important for them to interview Mike Siegler for a particular perspective as a certain type of constituent, and same with, a whole lot of other, like political people and environmental types. And
Okay, that's really helpful, actually. I think I was conflating issues of like the survey versus the public meeting versus the interview. So I think that was helpful. Or like who's getting in, who to nominate for an interview.
I think it's thought leaders in Lansing. That's my take on it. And they're trying to get the lay of the land and also figure out where the landmines are. So like large farmers like John, you're going to know a lot of individual people they should probably talk to right out of the gate.
Right. Yeah. And there's some that are hoping not to be farmers much longer if the solar stuff really starts moving.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to want to get a couple of those people also, for sure, their perspective on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because preserving that after it's gone solar, that's the open space is gone at that point, I guess.
Yeah.
Well,
They're at least
it depends on whether you consider solar completely ugly or not.
Right. Yeah.
It's still open space.
But my take on their interviewing is basically they're starting to gather the lay of the land in Lansing, and they want to know what landmines are out there, so to speak.
Okay, so we will wait for Katie to send out a Google Doc and start adding stakeholders to it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, if she doesn't have a column,
And have it done by the 14th.
I think it's good to have that deadline. If she doesn't have a column for why we're nominating that person, I think we should talk about the community that they will represent.
Yeah.
So we could add that column. There.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Let's see, Robin.
Okay, anything else regarding the open space index? Okay, we move on to Dandy Mart. Because this is a type 1 action, the Conservation Advisory Council gets to weigh in on the environmental assessment form. I think that's my understanding. CJ, do you want to talk about the role of the CAC regarding this Dandy Mart?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm not sure how familiar all of you are with Seeker. So if we could just do, is it okay to just do maybe a couple minutes on Seeker?
Please.
Sure.
A quick one? Okay. Yeah. All right, hold on just a second. This is an old presentation I gave, but it's still pretty fresh for our purposes. So we'll just know what seeker is. This was when the new seeker forms came out, and we'll forget about conflicts of interest right now. Okay, so seeker, what's the deal with seeker? Seeker is State Environmental Quality Review. And we complete this for a number of reasons, and just forget the word village there. Creation of successful projects, right? Bringing in multiple viewpoints and angles. That's one way. Conservation Advisory Council could be a big help to the planning board. Full substantive review, of course, helps protect the town. And of course, it's the law. So here's a little bit about State Environmental Quality Review Acts. That's the rules belong to DEC, so the Department of Environmental Conservation. And essentially, this applies to any discretionary action, and we'll get into that in just a moment. So what seeker isn't, right? Seeker is not a special type of permit, right? There's no special ministerial action that goes with it, meaning it's like a building permit or something like that, where it's just granted if the conditions are met. And essentially it's basically a layer of additional review. And in this case, this is a type 1 action. So what's subject to seeker? So that's any action, again, that is discretionary, requiring a discretionary permit or approval. So discretionary meaning that there's the opportunity to approve or deny or impose conditions. And again, approvals are not issued until seeker compliance has been demonstrated. And what does that mean? And for you guys, and I'll put some kind of guidelines in the chat, but substantive is hard look, right? So we want to make sure that we are looking to make substantive comments, right? So major issues, right? Not minor discrepancies or minor calculation errors or things like that. We want substantive comments that are not speculative and aren't unsupportive. So ideally with the most important comments first. And of course, we are very hip to seeker's procedure. The planning board has made a declaration of lead agency on this project. So that's telling all the involved agencies. And in this case, we're talking about Department of Environmental Conservation. We're talking about New York State Department of Transportation, because the project location abuts to state highways, as you know. And folks like the health department as well. So we've also included the Cuba Lake Scenic Byway folks as an interested agency as well. So we'll go through this pretty quickly, but just to give you, this is a kind of a nice overview. The first thing the planners do is classify the action on behalf of our agency. Now, sometimes depends on the type of action of who the lead agency is likely to be. In this case, planning board is tasked in the town of Lansing with conducting site plan review, right? So specific projects are subject to site plan review, and the planning board reviews the project and then approves or denies the site plan based on stated criteria. And then with that, makes a declaration of environmental significance. So that's down here at the bottom, but you can see that here we are classifying the action. Now, the reason why this project was a type 1 action is because of its adjacency to a building that happens to be on the National Register of Historic Places. So because of that threshold, it automatically, we request of the applicant a full environmental assessment form, and we are obligated to conduct a coordinated review with those involved agencies that I just mentioned. So your role here as an advisory, and of course at the request and pleasure of the planning board, is to help the planning board review the criteria for for a state environmental quality review, and provide background information for them to make a determination of environmental significance. So that gives us two options. A negative declaration, sometimes you may have heard it referred to as a quote neg dec, this is short, essentially says we're making a negative declaration of environmental significance. The lead agency determines that the impacts have been mitigated to that agency's satisfaction, and the project then typically that's done at the same time that an approval is issued. Now, the other option, of course, is that the planning board or the lead agency in whatever review process says, we really need way more information on elements of this proposal. That's something then called a POSDEC. A positive declaration says, hey, we need to do more review here. We're going to scope out everything that we think we need to take a look at as part of environmental impact statement. And then that process would begin along with that. So essentially that's more like an elongated environmental review. So again, what's an action? This is a physical activity such as construction, sometimes the adoption of plans, comprehensive plans. Zoning is typically a type 1 action because of the geographic extent that it typically touches down on. So for instance, the Cayuga Lake Scenic Byway, because that'd be covering 25 or more acres, I think that's the threshold for type 1, that would be an example of a type 1 action where we'd get a lot of information up front and a lot of analysis with that decision. So here's just a few examples, right? We got zoning, like I mentioned, site plans, subdivisions, but it can also include, other things like acquisition of property, some bond financing resolutions. There's a lot of things that environmental quality review can touch on. So again, a type 1 action, again, that's a matter under consideration that has crossed a threshold that essentially elevates it to say, hey, there's some notable impacts here that you're going to want to take a good hard look at. And we already know that that's the case from our list of type 1 actions. A type 2 action is one that doesn't need environmental review. It's been decided ahead of time by the DEC. There's a list of these actions that says, okay, well, excuse me, if you're constructing a building, say under 4,000 square feet, that's a type 2 action. That's a fairly, small project. You're not in proximity to, historic buildings or other, environmental elements of concern. No need to undergo a review. And then there's also unlisted, which is basically everything else in the world that's not on those two lists. We're not going to go into that in too much detail. I can send you links to those lists if you're really interested in it. But in essence, we have to classify the whole action, right? So it has to include all components or phases of a project. Sometimes people, developers will say, well, we're just going to kind of, do this one phase and we'll worry about the rest of it later, or, oh, well, stormwater later, and we're going to, just do this part of it now. The seeker really discourages that and encourages us to look at the whole action. So let's see what else is in here. We'll not get too far into segmentation because I don't think we're going to have to concern ourselves too much with that. But so here's a couple examples of type 1, right? Type 1 must be reviewed, right? It has the potential for significant environmental impacts that's been decided up front by the DEC. They've already said, okay. Again, lower thresholds if it affects an ag district, parkland, recreation, open space, historic properties, right? And so this is where we find ourselves here with an impact to historic property. And that requires this coordinated review. And again, the planning board has made a declaration of lead agency. I think it's important to note that only agencies with decision-making authority can get in the scrum about who would wish to be lead agency. Normally, everyone's not shoving to the front of the line to be lead agency. And typically it is the agency that has primary decision-making authority. So let's just see if I think there's one more kind of interesting piece for you here. Okay, yes. So type 1 again requires the preparation of a full environmental assessment form. So that's that big chunky, it's 10, 12 pages of questions for the applicant. You have to have a lead agency. You have to conduct this coordinated review. And you have to keep in mind that, there is a tendency to have impacts, but you don't necessarily have to prepare an environmental impact statement. That, again, is up to the lead agency. So I think that's pretty much the highlights of the process. Yes, and here we go, is the determination of significance. Now, this is the area where we want to encourage the CAC to provide, again, comments, help the planning board make a reasoned elaboration for whatever their decision may be. Again, relevant environmental impacts. This is always a balancing act with economic and social concerns. They can then take the information that you're giving and they can bake that into their determination of significance. So again, we have our full EAF, we have all of our, I guess this is back in the day, this is like a whole ream of paper here, but again, we have our options here, and we typically don't even mess around with this third instance. That's generally not a road we go down, but so again, the negative declaration allows a project to move forward. The environmental review is done, the lead agency makes their determination. And again, the positive declaration means we need more information, of course, beyond this stack here, and we'll need to go into public scoping and the preparation of an environmental impact statement. That said, not even if the project receives a positive declaration, that's not necessarily the case of being able to get too much more information, although it does, public scoping is now required, meaning, and what I mean by scoping is that if a positive declaration is made on a project, the lead agency has to have it's not a public, I don't think it's a public hearing per se, but it is public scoping, meaning these are all the categories that we're going to look at as part of that. Now we're nowhere near that yet. Obviously, the lead agency declaration has just been made. The environmental review process is just starting. But again, I wanted to just give you a little bit of background on, what is seeker, what does this mean, and how does the process essentially unfold. Okay, so again, any information that you're looking for as part of the environmental review, you can help the planning board. You can essentially advise them on additional documentation they may wish to request from an applicant. Again, focusing on major issues associated with the project, no speculative comments or unsupported assertions. And of course, organizing the comments essentially by weight, placing the highest priority comments really first in the correspondence, or I assume some kind of report that you might prepare, or can be just informal comments from a majority of the board, which you could, of course, approve by motion if you wish to. So hopefully that is a helpful intro.
So should we take a full environmental assessment, that 12, 13 page form, and go from there, look at that and see if there's anything in that should get our attention, and see if we can find out more information about some of their answers to the questions.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly. So, and I'll pop a couple of these in the chat as well. They're right out of the Seeker Handbook, which is 212 pages. And of course, I can happily send a link to that publication along as well, depending on if you really want to dig in to Seeker, which is always fun. You can check out the new handbook. It was updated by the state in 2020. Very nice. They did a really nice job with the 4th edition. So It's a really interesting process to know. And, you know, if you guys are thinking of petitioning to become a conservation board in the future, conservation board is really one of their key roles is to participate in environmental quality review. So not a bad thing to familiarize yourself with, and I think a really interesting area of planning and law. So that's probably plenty of information right there.
And is there a timeline for our input to the planning board?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So typically so we've just issued a declaration of lead agency on behalf of the planning board, and other agencies, other involved agencies have the ability to say they wish to be the lead agency. So we have to let a certain amount of time elapse, and I believe that's 30 days off the top of my head. It's of course here in the handbook. But from there, there's limits on the scoping. And let me just also bring up this little, I have a really great little seeker primer if the handbook is not, handbook is a little unruly. So let me bring this up for you. There's this seeker guide for local officials, I think, which is really nice, that will explain a little bit on the timelines. Just a moment. Okay, here we go. And I'll pop this one in the chat too. But bring this up right now. This has all of our timelines in it. Oh my gosh, internet. Oh, where's hold on a second, I must have the wrong one. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. Yes, but there are timelines on the different steps. And let me see if I can, hold on just a minute. This is one of those things where you, when you don't want it, you're always finding it. Okay, so here we go. You know, that is okay. All right, so here's our seeker flow chart. Let me, I'll just pop this in the chat for you too. Okay, so here is our, and of course this is in this a little bit of a wonky format here. So let me just zoom in if I can. Is it? Okay, so we're here, right? The action's been proposed, establishing lead agency. There's that 30-day deadline I was telling you about where, you know, say another agency that had decision-making authority wished to be a lead agency, they can say that. Then they have up to 20 days to determine significance. So that's generally speaking, that's usually extended by the applicant or the planning board or whatever lead agency is. That's generally informally extended, just so the lead agency can have enough time to make to get the information they need to be able to make that decision. Though with the planning board, that could happen as early as the, I'm guessing maybe the July 25th meeting. Let me take a look. So that would be Monday, July 25th. I would anticipate they may make that decision. Of course, it could be by the June meeting, which is why we're having this conversation now, so that you can all start to begin to put comments together. But hopefully that answers the question. And I'm going to send this to you. So.
Okay, so we should have our comments into the planning board no later than July 25th.
Ideally, as soon as you can get the comments together. That's actually one of the reasons why the CAC meetings were originally scheduled for this very spot on the calendar, was because we anticipated that the planning board would be taking an action, you know, to kick off seeker, and then you guys would know pretty much right away what that action was and would be able to turn around comments for them in time for their next meeting. So, ideally, we'd like to see comments, by close of business on June 23rd, if at all possible. Because remember, then that can actually, that will help them inform the decision about, how much more information they may need to request from the applicant. And of course, it's helpful to applicants to be able to know so they can get, if they need to be retaining additional consultants or, professionals or, whatever they need to be able to get the information to the lead agency. It's always helpful to know sooner rather than later.
Okay, so June 23rd, we need our comments in by June 23rd.
I think it would be appreciated and then can be included in the planning board packet as well.
But we don't have the EAF yet, do we?
Yeah, you should. It should be posted on the website. But let me take a look.
No.
Or maybe I misunderstood. I thought everything was being revised, but
I think you're right. The planning board told them to revise their full environmental assessment form because things have changed.
Okay, let me take a look here. Yeah, I believe that we did post the updated, but I will double check on that for you.
were you going to say something, Robin?
Yeah,
I
it was,
Oh, sorry.
just that when I opened that folder that you sent, all I saw was images and plans and no text, nothing that looked like a form text to read. So
Oh, wait.
were we expecting there to be a paragraphs of text that we were going to look at?
Is that Laserfish that you're talking about?
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything under current submissions. I mean,
There
there's
is
a
a
folder by that name.
There was something from 2020 that was in the folder for Dandy Mart. And then I called Tom and I'm like, is that the most recent thing? And that's when he sent out some stuff to the CAC. But Ed, did you ever get in there?
I got in a different site and there is an EAF form in there, 15 pages, along with a stormwater protection plan of 378 pages. So it's so the question I have.
Oh yeah, don't worry about this. The SWIP. Of course you're welcome to look at it, but the town has a dedicated stormwater management officer who's going to review that, and that is approved. It's usually a condition of approval of the planning board that the stormwater management officer and town engineer are satisfied with that SWIP as part of the approval. Yeah.
So that was a question on scope, because this is a type 1 action because it's next to a historic site. Is the assessment we're making any impact this may have on the historic site, or because it's a type 1 action, it throws the whole thing open to any kind of assessment of the site?
Yeah, exactly. Any substantive comment the CAC has on the project. And just to clarify, that was the rationale for why the action was classified that way. But environmental review covers all those categories that you'll see in that full environmental assessment form. Things from community character to impact on lands, impact on water. And so to make this easy, what I'll do is send you directly the revised full environmental assessment form in your email right now, and I'll try to keep it short and sweet here.
Great.
I know you guys get a lot of emails.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Instead of poking around.
I have to say, when I think that we're supposed to give only substantive comments, I'm realizing the limitations of my knowledge about things like this. In fact, I'm feeling like you, Robin, where I'm like, I'm not sure I'm qualified to do this. So do we divide and conquer? Like Todd looks at hydrology and, somebody else looks at birds. I'm just curious as to how other CACs approach something like this.
What's the definition of substantive?
Right. I guess that's the clearest way to say it.
Yeah, relative essentially to project impacts related to one of those categories. I'll also, I don't want to bog you down with stuff, but there are a set of workbooks that go along with the full environmental assessment form. They're actually really nice, and they do really help hone in on each part of the environmental assessment, and really helps the reviewing agency make that determination of environmental significance by showing a bunch of hypotheticals, which is pretty cool. So let me pop that. Let me pop that into, just in case you're interested in it. It seems, it's kind of dense, but once you get into them, each one are kind of broken down into the different questions about, planning and zoning actions, community services, project operations, land use around the site, public resources near the project site, and then, digging into a little bit about the magnitude of, the potential impact of the project. So those guidebooks, the workbook is really helpful, and I think you will find it interesting and part of your review, but I would definitely recommend Subdividing and Conquering.
Okay, so along those lines, if we wanted to subdivide, we're definitely looking at the 15-page EAF and any other documentation, but not the SWIP. Do I have that?
I mean, you're welcome to look at the SWIP, of course, but know that the stormwater management officer appointed by the town specifically to make decisions on that, he's kind of like the code enforcement officer, makes determinations on, building code, building permitting, zoning, and the like. He has that sole authority to make the decision on whether that's accepted on behalf of the town or not. And he is both a certified professional in erosion and sediment control, as well as a certified floodplain manager. So he has my full confidence.
Yes, I want him to do that. Yes.
Oh yes, yep, he will.
Okay. Okay, so if we're supposed to divide and conquer, maybe we should make a plan in our last couple of minutes about how to do that.
And I'll get this email thread out to you right now. So if you did want to spark a discussion and, amongst yourselves about what parts you wanted to take of the EAF, you'll have it right in front of you. And of course, you can contact me or John Zepko, town planner, with any questions about the review as well.
Yeah, I think we all have to look at the form and see if there's any particular section that we want to deal with.
Yeah, particularly there's a question on traffic. Now that's got to be the DOT dealing with that, I would assume. That's not something we're capable of making an assessment on, because they do say it's going to increase traffic or something like that. So that's one of the positive. There's not, looking through that form, there's not an awful lot of things they've checked off that would seem to trigger an awful lot of concern.
Yep, that determination will be again up to the planning board, but of course, that is with your input and substantive comment again about any of those areas that are listed on the full environmental assessment form, which is now in your inbox.
Yeah, another question: if we would say, if this is going to operate, that's one of the problems on the form. They have it going from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and it's probably not what they're going to do. But if it's going to be at 9 o'clock, they pull the plug and shut down. Are we able to say we would like to have all lights on that system under motion sensors so that we don't have light pollution going on at that corner? Is that something within our purview? Is that something that somebody else is going to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a little bit of course, detail that goes with questions about business operations and the limits that the approving agency can place on business operations. For instance, one of the fundamentals of zoning is that you can't regulate things like hours of operation, right? However, the planning board in conjunction with the applicant, one substantive comment could be, for instance, and something we regularly get from the County Environmental Management Council, is that all lights, of course, be dark sky compliant, full cutoff, no brighter than 2,700 or maybe 3,000 K. I can't remember what they're
2,700.
Okay, thanks, Tom. What their color, temperature, and recommendations relative to lighting are. But of course, that kind of condition could be presented to the applicant to say, hey, look, the Conservation Advisory Council obviously is very concerned about light trespass, additional kind of fugitive illumination, as it were. The applicant, as I understand it, will be submitting a photometric study, and that will be also passed on to you to be able to take a look at as well. So that will essentially, it's kind of like a little graphic rendering of what the light impacts are to be on the property. So yeah, absolutely. You can certainly say that as part of your comments for the applicant to be mindful of that.
Hey, CJ, I've got a question about this too, whether, it's just a weak argument or if there's a way to craft this. The part of the meeting that I was able to tune into once they turned the sound on, they were talking about, oh, there's going to be all of these plantings, and they kept talking about cherry trees, and there's basically not going to be, it's not going to be hidden or made more beautiful by trees that are going to be bare 7 months out of the year. Not to mention, I'm not sure what, if they're going to put a big berm up around there or what they could possibly do other than like put a huge fence on, to restrict the views of this behemoth building that's going in, and it is behemoth. So I don't know. I mean, it's an aesthetic thing. I don't know that it's an environmental conservation-y kind of a comment, but is that just too emotional to add something like that in? It seems like it's like a window dressing band-aid that they would even say, oh, we're going to plant some deciduous trees. We've taken care of the view issue.
Okay, I'm not sure that I exactly understand the question. Are you saying that you'd want to see more robust plantings, or?
I'm just saying that I don't think that they have solved the problem by their solution. And I don't believe that there is an easy solution, but the fact that they're just kind of waving their hands and saying, oh, we're planting cherry trees, check that box, is strong enough. But I don't know whether that's a strong enough argument to even bother thinking through it even further, because they've checked the box. Whether it's effective or not seems to not be the question. Maybe. I just don't know. I'm asking your advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I think we'd have to, again, just tie it back to one of those categories in the full environmental assessment form.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. It's asking if the proposed action would substantially increase traffic. It says no, but then it said under if yes, they answered all those things. Why would they do that if it isn't going to affect it?
That's a good question, but I think it probably has to do with the average annual daily traffic. So that's AADT and traffic engineer speak, meaning that the road is already carrying, this is just a guess, I think it's probably around, I don't know, maybe 7,000 to 8,000 vehicles a day. Does that sound right? I mean, I can certainly pull up the DOT viewer. And the engineers, generally speaking, calculate the trips that are generated, typically based on that land use. And then they, make a calculation relative to how many vehicles are essentially already traveling by the project site. So even if it is a substantial number per se, if in the aggregate, it's not, the number is not significantly changing the flow on, for instance, a state highway in this instance, then they could consider that a small impact. But again, remember, that's up to the planning board. This part 1 statement is the applicant's statement. The planning board is going to complete a part 2 statement, and you'll see that in the workbooks. And that is where the planning board gets to go through and say, okay, we see that your answer to this question is X. Tell us a little more about that. So that's why this is a great opportunity to kind of even asking these questions are excellent. You can even just pose your comments in the form of questions. That's perfectly fine.
Okay. So given that it's not too far away, I mean, we need to have our act together in less than 3 weeks. Do we need to set up a mechanism by which we'll collate comments and maybe even have, a Zoom call among CAC members who can make it, just to kind of get our act together before submitting?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do this through email. Because we're not, June 23rd is not that far away.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And again, yeah, I think I'm hearing that there's interest in folks saying, I did hear Karen's comment about the community character question, and I'll pop a bunch of different categories that could be relevant into that comment. But aesthetics and design are certainly part of that.
I guess I'm a little bit worried about just leaving it to email, because if we have to comment as a CAC, then we might need a little more discussion, kind of like this, some type of call or Zoom, because it's our first one, and like we don't exactly know what we're doing.
Yeah, you're an advisory committee. You can meet, as far as I understand it, whenever you wish. So if you'd like to hold another meeting by Zoom to discuss, you're certainly more than welcome to.
I'm willing to do that. I know that, that's a heavy commitment, because we're doing a land trust thing on the 14th, and now we have this, but we've got this Google Doc we need to contribute to, but this is a time limited assignment. You have to be done by before the next meeting. So, I mean, would we be able to meet in like a week or two? Or at least a few of us could meet.
And in the meantime, go through the form and email out what we think might be concerned, so that the meeting can be pretty quick to clarify things,
and preferably on a very rainy night.
Yeah.
So,
next Thursday.
unless your planting's completely done.
Another couple days.
So let's, shall we try and schedule another Zoom meeting?
I think we have to.
Okay, so
Sorry to say. I mean, I guess also if we needed to talk about stakeholders at our next meeting, we could also do that, but quickly, as John says. I mean, how long do people need to go through this? Like a week?
I think a week
Yep.
is reasonable.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Like I could do it next Wednesday night, the 8th.
That works for me.
I think it does for me too.
That's okay on my schedule.
Yeah, it's okay as long as it really is quick. We're past our 8:30 usual end date now for end time today, so I'm not sure what quick means for this group anymore.
I'm,
So
I'm guessing it could be up to an hour, but we could try to make it like 40 minutes. We could really try, especially if people have comments, said, you know, like emailed to each other. What time?
6:30 as usual.
Okay.
Okay.
And is the Zoom going to be a Lansing Zoom, or are you going to do it, Carrie?
I'm willing to. I could send out my Zoom. Is that, I think it doesn't have to be public, does it, CJ?
No, and we can I can just set the Zoom so that you guys can jump on too. It's your whatever you like.
Great. And,
Okay.
and then we can just let ourselves in to the meeting.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'll
Great.
edit that now after we end this meeting. I'll be able to edit the settings so you guys can just jump on.
Awesome. I think we're going to need it.
So
Same chat channel.
6:30 on Wednesday, the 8th.
Okay. Great. Yeah, thanks everybody. And it's a lot of time.
Hey, Carrie, quick
Mhm.
question. I gotta get off the phone, but would you mind sending around that map link that I sent you that shows the UNAs?
Oh, to the CAC?
Lansing? Yeah, because I'm sure everybody will want to see
Sure.
that. It kind of makes maybe helps make my comments about corridors and connectivity make a little more sense.
Sure. And then before you go, I know, Tom, you and I were going to bring up EMC representation. Can I just ask before Karen signs off? I know Todd needs to go too. Is everybody fine with David Wolf being our EMC rep?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Evan hasn't filled out the necessary paperwork and only went to one meeting, so. Okay, that was quick, super quick.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Thanks. Take care. Good luck with all of your meetings that I'm not going to be attending. Can't do it.
Okay.
Carrie and Tom, can I just quickly tell you that I won't be at the August meeting. I'll be in Ecuador.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Nice, nice.
But I should be here for July, assuming it's I looked at the date, but it was not like around the 4th of July. It was the 7th, right? So I should be here for that one, but not the one after that.
Wow. August. That's great.
Yeah, I may miss that August meeting also. I'll have to see.
Are you in the Galapagos, Robin?
No, mainland Ecuador, and then there's an island trip, but it's not the Galapagos.
Okay.
Oh.
It's birding, mostly birding.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And then I'm also going to be gone. I'm flying out the 24th of this month through like July 3rd. So anything that has a deadline like before like the 23rd, it's, I'm not going to do it on the 23rd. So anything that you want comments back on, like sooner might be better than later, since I'll be out of town for a week.
Okay.
So I'll try to get my stuff done before it's the last minute.
The August meeting is on the 4th. Is that right? There's a Thursday.
Yep.
4th. Okay, I can make that one.
Okay, great. So did you Todd and Tom, did you want to give a quickie
Sure. Go ahead, Todd.
assessment of the planning board meeting?
Yeah, the meeting was very non-confrontational. We just basically laid out what the overlay was. And we had sort of a wider overlay north of the bridge at Salmon Creek and a narrower one at the bottom. There was some concern about whether we had taken people's personal properties into consideration. And I said we hadn't. It was just was a generic thing. We also pointed out that this was information that they could use for planning. It wasn't, we weren't imposing restrictions necessarily. And in fact, I think we had just, one thing I pointed out that we had discussed, there could be situations in which there might be development that enhances the view or takes advantage of the views that we had kind of pointed out, but we were just kind of laying out those as being kind of the critical areas to consider as they move forward. There was a little bit of pushback, but it wasn't too bad, Tom, I don't think, was it? I think people were pretty receptive and thought this was a good thing to have.
Yeah, I think there was some misunderstanding about what we were trying to do. And we tried to explain that we were tasked to make an overlay district and how wide it was going to be, and to pick out particular areas that were exceptional. And that's all we did. There was Lynn Davidson's property is a part of one of our really nice views, and he wanted to know how we were going to compensate him for preventing him from developing that property.
And we told him Robin would do that for him, so that was no problem. So it was an easy answer there. So no, I think at the end they all understood that this was this was good information, but it wasn't necessarily punitive or overly restrictive, I don't think. Anyways, I thought it went well. When I left, it seemed like everybody had a positive reception to what we had to present.
Good. Well, that's good news. Looks like it left Tom cold because he's frozen as far as my screen.
Yeah, that's how he was that night too. He was just exactly like that, so it was kind of awkward.
Simply frozen in time. Oh my, I hope we get Tom back, because that means otherwise I'm going to need to end the meeting, which I will do almost immediately.
All right. Thanks. No, it went well. I thought there was really, yeah, I think, like I say, at the end, I think everybody came away thinking like, oh yeah, this was good information to have in hand, and they would consider it.
Okay. All right, good. So do you get the sense that the next step is that it goes to the rezoning committee, or does the planning board have a role?
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that question, but that's the next step was not clear, but the current step was, thank you for doing this, basically. They were appreciative.
Okay. All right. So that's great. And then
I'm going to pop that process right in the chat for you guys.
Okay. So we're partway into that process then. Okay.
Well, it's because the code revision committee has been tasked with the agricultural zoning update first. That's my understanding is the town's chief priority. That's what's been authorized by the town board thus far. But again, initiation for a new idea can come from anyone at some point when CAC is ready. I'm thinking it might be part of that process for the open space index. Could be a really great opportunity to present the idea to the town board to say, hey, we've been working with planning board, we've been collecting our research, and we think we, would really like the code revision committee to take this up and, develop this further in further consultation with us. And to that end, you will also be getting the first draft of the preliminary working draft, I should say, of the agricultural zoning district, the new one that has long been requested by the town as part of the ag plan. So that'll be coming to you real soon too. So add that to your plate to talk about.
Okay, great. For July, something to look forward to.
Totally.
Is it coming that soon?
Yeah, it'll be to you. I'm planning to send it out first thing tomorrow. So.
Oh, I guess it is going to be soon. Okay, great. Well, not too much moss growing underneath these stones.
And it's fairly, we're just talking about a few pages here, just looking for general comments and suggestions. This is by no means the end opportunity for this. We're going to be doing engagement all summer, and I'm going to try to convince town board to push those dates back a little bit. I really think it's important for the ag community to be involved and be aware, and we need a little time to make sure we get the word out to them. And again, I'm one of those planners that is, very allergic to doing things in the summer. I think it's just, fall is, well, you just, there's only so much good weather, so anyway, as you all well know. So
if we tackle this at our July meeting, that's plenty of time. There's Tom.
Yeah, that should be fine. Please focus, I would say, your comments on the Dandy Mart proposal, because obviously that is a direct referral from the planning board, but then again, so is the zoning, but you could break those off again as well too, and have some folks just look at the zoning and maybe have some other people look at the that type 1 action that's been referred to you. So I know it's a lot going on, but here we are.
Yeah, well, look what you created here, CJ.
All
Okay,
you
Tom,
guys.
are you with us?
Yeah.
Okay.
My connection just cut out. So
Okay. Well, great. You can end the meeting then, or I guess.
Okay. Well, is everybody done?
I think we're done, aren't we? Yeah, more than done. Yeah.
Okay. I'll put you in charge of ending the
Thumbs
meeting.
up. I hereby call
Right.
it.
Okay.
All right. We'll see some
And
of you
thank you.
Wednesday.
Well, thanks for everybody's input. I thought this was a really good meeting, and CJ, for somebody with a screaming headache, wow, you really you performed.
I'm hanging in there. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for all your help.
Yeah. All right.